Hi there, students. Thanks for joining me for this figurative forms drawing critique. I've given you the blurb before. It's above the video, below the video, just so you know that these critiques are focused on your growth, not on judging your work. So I often focus on what you can do to further develop your drawings, because this is the opportunity to do that. And so let's get started. So our first student here, this was their week 1 submission on the discussion board. So we have a number of photos and then the thumbnail sketches that go along. And the student did note that they thought that they might be a little confused about what was going on in the assignment. And I think that shared confusion, or just knowing that there's something that you're not doing quite right, it seems to be working really nicely on the discussion board, that you can share these things with each other. And as you look at other people's submissions, you kind of further figure things out. But I think that the student chose some really interesting photos to work with. You can see that the student really wants to get this kind of enclosed form, where the form is kind of enveloping over each other. And whether that's a specific kind of a very, what am I trying to say? A very deliberate choice, or whether it's kind of subconscious, it's a great choice because it's a choice. So playing around with the background, and the artist did say that they needed to have some other reference points, reference images besides just the figures. So in the week 2, the student submitted these reference photos. So they've got this pan and the leaves coming up, and chose one of the figures to draw from. And so we've got these ideas of where they might go. And they happened upon this idea up here, kind of a combination of a bunch of ideas in the thumbnail sketches. But the pan behind the leaves coming out, really, really interesting ideas that they're working with. So here is the start. So we can see kind of how the drawing was starting. And we can see these really wonderful gradients. And just like in the last drawing with the landscape, this artist really has a wonderful sense of planning out a drawing and then executing it, but not executing it in a way that makes it feel very boring, but in which it seems to be constantly evolving. So that's really wonderful to see. The form looks really nicely done. Often it's hard to figure out a human form in just line. So I think that, there's this huge, broad area of the back that I think feels too vast when it's empty. But then you can see when the color is added and the light and shadow, it really makes a lot of sense here. So let me see, I think I'm going to crop this down so that we can see basically as much as possible. So let's crop that down and make it a little bigger so that we can really focus on it. And you see how the background is in watercolor, I believe, and the plate is in colored pencil, or maybe even some Conte crayon, not colored pencil. Well, it might be colored pencil. It might be black colored pencil. Maybe that's how it got so black. Beautiful gradients here. I think a wonderful wispy application of the watercolor I can imagine that something like, let's see if I can make this really big. Something like this area here where it bled, the artist might have felt like, I didn't want that, but I almost wish there was more of that. I see these seem like they are outline in pen maybe, and then watercolor to fill in the color. I would even add a bit more depth. If we take a look at, and that might be just from using different references. See, the way the light is hitting the reference, it's coming like this. And then the way it would, well, if this was, I don't think, does this, if this was turned on its side, I think the light would be hitting it in the right way. But logically, something underneath closer to the ground might be a bit darker. So to have a little bit more oomph to those leaves, but I can see that the artist spent so much time and so much care on the shading of the figure and the shading of the pan that it certainly, I don't even look at that kind of stuff. So, except that I did point it out, didn't I? So pay attention to how this big, broad area of the back, it does feel very vast when it's linear. And then when it's, do I have a line drawing? No, I think it's oh yeah, I do. Okay, so when it's linear, it's the big, broad area of the back. But when the shading is added, it starts to feel more like the reference photo, right? And I think that the watermark on the reference photo can be a little bit distracting as well. I can really feel the folds of the body here. And I think that it was a wonderful choice to use yellow and red. The red added to add darkness, and it creates an orange, obviously. But the yellow, it doesn't, so the orange isn't so similar to the background that it feels too similar, but it kind of ties everything together. It's a beautiful execution of this drawing. Just wonderful. I think there's a lot of skill being used with the colored pencils, really just fantastic stuff. So going on to this one, the first week we saw these reference photos. I think this one here is from a book, probably. And then this one here looks like something that the artist made, either a drawing or a digitally altered drawing, because we can see the artist right here. Great photo. I really get the personality here. Okay, so I can see that this first photo feels very severe. It could be because of the angularity of the face, the tightness of the lips. But even here in the tightness of the lips feels as though it's suppressing a smile. There's a kindness in the face in both this one and this one. So I love how this, I don't believe is the project. I think this was a reference photo, and it was probably a project for another class or just something the artists did on their own. But you can really, the kindness kind of comes across in the artwork here. And then we have some thumbnail sketches here, playing around with color and shape. So really focusing on something very simple and playing around with the color and the shape. So we've got, for week 2, the artist handed in the thumbnails and these two drawings, and really focusing on watercolor. And it's interesting how there is white between each of the shapes. So that's an interesting choice. there's a real flatness to it in many ways because there's one material being used and it's often being used in the same way. So we would get a very uniform kind of application of materials if you're using the same material in the same way. But if we use watercolor and we do a wash, and then we have little lines that we make, and then we go over the dry wash with other things. So if you use watercolor and you use it in multiple different ways in one drawing, then you get a lot more variety to your surface. And in this way, I think that these could be very quickly done, and they're almost like moods. So exploring how the different colors create a different mood. So it would be interesting to know what the artist is going for, what the student artist is going for, because I think that I'm getting different moods because of the different colors, but I'm also getting kind of an experimentation of how to do a number of different faces that are related to her face, but not specifically her face. So I'd be interested to see how this developed if the artist could use more of the materials. So with the watercolor, add some colored pencil for some linear textural things, and then add in some black pen or something else to play around with. So moving on to this one, and this artist had said, oh, I didn't, in most of these, oh, there it is. So this artist had said that they were still figuring out what they were supposed to be doing. And I got that from a few people, that it was confusing how to use all these references in one place. The artist chose some really interesting references. I was so puzzled with this center photo up here. I was like, what are they going to use that for? But then I saw in the final one. And then the orange and probably a grapefruit and the banana. This is a lovely, it's a lovely composition here. Just very, very simple. And the background of that black table, it's just lovely. And looking into a bag, oh my gosh, who would have thought of that? It's like genius there. Who would have thought to draw the inside of like an aluminum foil bag? But when you look at it, like, well, yeah, this is gorgeous. This is something that just gets me so excited, as you can see. And then the artist found some form. These two are the two second ones are very similar, and you can see how they would be able to relate to each other. And then the first one is quite different. And you can see a lot of playfulness with the materials, trying to, not worrying too much if it comes out exactly right. I think that there isn't a lot of, so I think that there is not a lot of blending of references. So we've got, and I saw that in a few drawings, and I think I get why that would be, because it's hard to add every reference to every thumbnail, right? So I see that I think that the artist, when they were seeing what was on the discussion board, then they kind of knew what to do next. And so the week 2 submission, we've got the beginning of the drawing here, the inside of the plastic bag, and that turns into this shape in the middle. We have their workspace around. I always love to see the workspace. And from the watercolor stuff, you can see that they actually used watercolor, a real blend of materials that that was bringing this thing to life. I think that I think on the second image, where's my, oh, I don't have so I think this thing that the artist is holding in their hand, I think that becomes this shape. I'm not sure. And then there's a grapefruit up here and the bag in the middle, and the images of the figures in the 3 parts. Really interesting stuff. Let's look at the final one. So this is the final one. I think it's the same photo, just zoomed in. I might have even cropped it. I can't remember. But so I think the artist has been doing a great job really experimenting with the application of the materials. And let's make this super duper big. Also giving themselves challenges that they want to. Oh, I guess I can't make it super duper big. So when we look at like this area here, just go like this and then put it here so that I can see it. There we go. Okay, so look at this area here. Oh my gosh, come on. There we go. This area here with the watercolor. We've got, it looks like some, you know, the more you zoom in, the more abstract it gets. The artist was really loose and free with the marks that they were making. And these kind of, on this figure, we have some really wonderful marks that feel very textural. And it's, you kind of think, well, how did those come about, right? So let me, you know, there's this dry brush here. There's, I think that these textural marks are kind of, you know, it could have been like some kind of a texture that was underneath the paper. And I also could be more excited about it than the artist was. It could be that, oh, that pencil just wasn't doing what I wanted it to, you know? So that's always really fun to think about, for me anyway. So one thing that I would recommend would be to do something in the white space, just something. It doesn't matter really what it is, but I think that adding something to the white space could really help focus your eyes and make it feel as though that with the white space around it, it feels more like a logo, which could be what the artist is going for. And it feels more logo-like because the edges are so defined. I think that the hand, let's talk about the hands real quickly. I think these, at the top figure, the gestural hands, really beautifully done. It doesn't bother me at all that, that it's very simplified, and it doesn't especially, it doesn't look like a hand. If you saw that without the rest of the picture, you wouldn't say, oh, that's a hand. But it feels like a hand because the rest of it is there. And we look at the context clues. When I was learning to read, I remember in first grade, they'd always talk about context clues, and that works in art as well. And then this hand here, the red hand, this feels less, I mean, I'm glad that it's not overly described. And I don't think it calls my attention to it, but in terms of drawing a hand, it doesn't feel realistic. But I think that the artist was really trying to be very gestural, quick, and not overthink things. So I think in that way, it works beautifully. This guy here, the blue guy, I can really feel the form. I can feel the roundness of the form because of the way some of the dark streaks of blue are extended as folds into the center of the body. And then with the red form, I feel like this expanse of the back and the head, they feel a little bit flat. And this feels a little not figured out, but it doesn't call my attention. Like those are things that you could work on with practice, but it doesn't call my attention as something that must be fixed. Okay. I think this is a really wonderful exploration. Let me just see what the artist said, so that design on one another through shapes, lines, line work. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I think that what they were saying makes a lot of sense. And they said, yeah, so I think that their words are kind of echoed in what I said in a lot of ways. So moving on to this one. So in this artist's work, we had a bunch of images. In week 1, we got a bunch of images, and then we got these thumbnail sketches just of the figures. So again, another student who was kind of confused at the beginning, which is when I figure if more than 1 or 2 students are confused on the same thing, that it's something that I need to describe more fully. So we've got these figures, and there aren't other things being added to them. So I would say that on your figure drawings, there's nothing distinctly wrong with them, but I think that you would have an easier time if you thought of the structure instead of the outline. So when you're drawing figures, think about kind of the way they're structured. Let me see if I can find an example. I know that we've got a number of people who were kind of mannequinizing their figures. Let me just find one. They're everywhere but where I'm looking. Oh, here's some. Oh, what's going on here? Oops, what is going on with this thing? Oh no, why are these lines in here? Let's take them out. Okay. So see how this artist has like the center lines figured out, and sometimes they have a little circle where the shoulders are. And then where are some other ones? This artist is really looking at the whole of the figure, figuring out the angles, the center lines, the direction that the bones are going in. And it kind of helps if you figure out the inside of the figure first with kind of lines that represent kind of bones, almost like a stick figure. It can be easier to kind of mold that the structure around them. Okay, going back up to here. So this was week 1, and then week 2, the submission was right here. And let me just take these off. So we've got some thumbnails, and then, oh, I know they posted references. There was one, oh, but I can't quite remember what they were. There was one that was a bowl that had a sun shine on the bowl. And then I don't know where the clouds came from. And so we've got the big drawing here. We've got the partway through drawing. I'm going to crop this drawing so that we can see it without the surrounding. And this is always just, I think that I ask for so many references, and I'm so glad that students give them all to me, because it really helps me understand your process. So the more photos you upload, the more I understand your process. So I think that this figure is so interesting, because this little itty bitty nook right here just describes the gesture so impeccably. You just really feel the way she's looking at you. Let's see. So this is kind of this image right here. See that look? You can really feel that gesture right here, can't you? And then the way the face is drawn, it really reminds me of those first, we saw some other drawings that had this reference right here, this first reference, that almost, you can see that a little bit in this face. Beautifully done. These zoomed in, the details, I almost like the details better than the full drawings that you all send me. It's just beautiful. Look at the application of that paint. So loose, so gestural, just, you know, it's not a complicated, well, it has another picture on it, so that makes it a little more complicated. It's very simply executed, but I think that that simplicity makes it, because it makes it so that you don't focus too much on any one part. And then this one down here, the way these folds are drawn in or painted and drawn. And, you know, there's a simplicity to it that isn't overly fussy. And I think that when I look at the sketches, like the pencil sketches that this artist does, there's a real kind of sketchiness, and it feels very tight in a way that doesn't make me, I was going to say that doesn't make me feel comfortable. It's not about making me feel comfortable. It's more about kind of finding yourself as an artist. And to me, even though I don't know you very well, I feel like this way of sketching has a hesitancy and a worry about it, which could serve you to put some really interesting meaning into your drawing. And then the watercolor sketches that you've been doing, how you've done this watercolor has a looseness, a freeness, and it really comes together so beautifully. Again, on this one, I wish there was something else going on in the background. And I think that it might have been a bit more interesting to have the sun maybe bigger, maybe it feels like everything's kind of clumped in the middle. And one thing I like to see is when the page is kind of has something everywhere, not little things, but something. So for me, it seems like everything's in the center, and then it feels as though this part is unfinished and the other side is unfinished. But I think that this is one of my things that I tell students to do, but it isn't necessarily the way to do things. Okay. So, love this drawing. Moving on to the next one. So this was week 1, and the artist said they had a hard time figuring out the layout. Below are the references, getting out of the comfort zone. And so here are the thumbnails. And I see that this one is mainly coming from this right here, this image right here. And then we've got this one coming from this one. And this one, I don't know if yeah, I think this was a drawing. I'm not sure whose drawing this was, if this was the artist's or another person's. I think that's kind of echoed here. So, like a lot of other students, I think it was hard for them to figure out, well, how am I putting all these references together? Okay, I think that was a tricky thing for most people. So then week 2, this was the submission. And so I think it looks kind of like, it looks most like this one with different hair. So it might be that it was like different hair. I can't remember. I don't see any. I might have, oh no, there it is. Okay. The artist can see their style and the way they drew the face and use the charcoal. Yes, I see that. This similar style coming up. Using charcoals and watercolors and using red paint. I wanted the composition to have the legs cut off, the head outside the box. Drawing a full body is definitely out of the comfort zone. The torso and the legs are pretty good, but I feel like the arms are out of proportion. Yes, I feel the same way. I feel like the neck is coming down in a way that doesn't seem quite right. So it's as though, let's see if I can just get a quick shape. This is not going to be helpful. I feel like the neck is coming down so that the spine is too far. If the neck is coming down like this, the spine would be way over here. And you want to kind of create a kind of central, so that the neck just needs to come over in the other direction a little way. And then the shoulders might be a little bit broad, and that might be what's going on with the arms. A lovely, you know, what's interesting is that I was saying that this one felt as though it wasn't being fussed over, and that gave it kind of a simplicity. And this one feels like it's been very fussed over, and it gives it a strength. So it's really interesting in the way you use your own distinctive style. I think you can come upon all kinds of interesting meaning in your drawing, right? So if you are very hesitant with pencil, that will come across as a nervous energy. So use that. Like, I want people to sense the nervousness. And if you don't want people to sense the nervousness, you know, use the watercolor that will not have the nervousness. Or in this case, you know, using all of these different materials, it brings about kind of, you know, it feels more like a model drawing where you're kind of scrounging into the depths and playing around with clay almost. Interesting drawing. So still looking for where the references are coming from. That's not clear for me. That doesn't mean that, you know, all hope is lost. Sometimes you can, you know, in this drawing that looks like it just comes from maybe a photograph or something, the artist might have been looking at a photograph from online for the general feel of it, and then maybe their friend's hair for this part, and maybe, oh gosh, I mean, maybe a piece of paper on a table for the rest of it. I mean, that's very kind of out there, but you know, stranger things have happened. So as long as you can argue to me that the references came from the different places that they should have come from, then fine with me. Okay, moving on. Let's see, how long have I been jabbering on for? Who knows? I don't see it right here. Usually it has a timer. Okay, moving on. We've got, oh, we're only about halfway through. How about if I do one more and then I'll do a separate video for the last few. So this last one had so many reference photos in week one. So many that they're just piled up on top of each other. So we had people, and then we had hands that that the artist, oh, see, everything's piled on top of each other. Hands, that pictures of hands that the artist took from herself, and cactus and flowers. And so if I bring these over here, you can see how there's hands for sketches, and then there's almost kind of thumbnails where you don't have everything figured out, but you have kind of a story that you're trying to tell. And I think that's kind of what was going on here, that the artist had a story they wanted to tell, but so you can just really feel the gesture. So you see this gesture of this person here, but then hair is added and maybe other things are added, get almost wings and things like that. And then this gesture here comes up in the drawing that they did. So the hair falling down and the cacti behind. And so then we go to the next, the final submission, and we can see that well, let's see what the artist said, because I keep forgetting to look at what the artist said. Wanted to use very bold and contrasting colors, with dark greens and pandy sandy colors, pale sandy colors. Rusty with the watercolor, feeling rusty and unsure with the watercolor, and had trouble with the saturation of each. Really like how the cactus came out. I love the way the cactus comes out. Yes, my cat has things to say. It's like you were feeling the form of the cactus without the spikes. Beautiful. I love it. And if they used this assignment again, it says that they were all right with the brush control and all right with, struggled with the brush control, but all right with the result. I'm pretty cool with the result too, because I think that there's something, even though you feel rusty with the brush, there's a looseness that I don't think you'll be able to achieve as successfully when you really figure out how to do things. So it might be, everything is kind of a double-edged sword. There are wonderful things about not quite having everything together yet. And I think that's what I'm seeing here. And they try to get softer colors and a more varied palette. I totally agree with that. So you want to have, in this painting drawing, you've got a color palette that is very contrasty, but contrasty in terms of hue. So we've got greens and reds and oranges and browns. So, but they're all very, very bright, saturated colors. So, except for the brown, but it's still like right out of the pot. They're the actual colors that came on the color, on the watercolors. And so playing around with desaturating more colors would probably give you a more varied surface and a lot more depth. And I feel like this, every inch of it goes boom in my face. Is that what people say about art? Yeah, that's what the professor says about art. It goes boom in my face. And so it's just kind of a punch everywhere you look. And the secret is to tone it down in some areas so your eyes are drawn to other areas, if that's what you want. If that's not what you want, then, don't do it. Oh, very, very interesting. The one thing that I think was an interesting, the colorfulness of the body is super interesting. The blue leg doesn't quite work for me, but you don't have to have everything work for me. I wonder if some of this red came onto the blue leg, into the shadow, or maybe into the whole thing, it might feel more as though it were part of the body, but it being blue makes it feel more part of the background. Visually, we are always going to put together similar colors. We do that socially, which is weird. but visually we do that. I just broached on a huge subject and then I'm just glazing right over it. I apologize for that. So, but let's focus on the art instead of going on a huge tangent half an hour into the drawing, half an hour into the video. So the blue leg will associate that more with the mountains than we will with the rest of the body, which is really, really interesting. So I would add some red to the leg and then maybe a little bit of blue to the edge of the arm. So it feels like kind of a shadow. I think there's a looseness to this drawing that's really, really beautiful. I wish that there were more materials being used. I think that you do have a very, very varied, that's complicated, a very varied, oh my gosh, come on, I'm just trying to make you bigger. There we go. You have a lot going on. And so it seems like, you know, why would you add more? And I think that adding some ink or some colored pencil as surface, not as outline. I know I tend to, if I have, I think the instinct is to add ink or something else as outline. But what you want to do is add it as surface. So if you add colored pencil as added surface, it'll give a depth and it'll give it, if you have a variety of marks in terms of dark and light and big and small, then it really makes for a very active surface. And this is just a fantastic drawing. So I'm going to end there and we'll start up with the last few drawings in the next video, because I think this one's going pretty long. Thanks for joining me.